You are about to step into a mystery where science meets the unknown. Close your eyes and imagine a shoreline that no longer exists. The last ice age is ending. The seas are still hundreds of feet lower than today. Rivers cut deep canyons into what is now the continental shelf. Villages and trade routes cling to the coasts of lands we've forgotten. Doggerland stretching across the North Sea. Sundaland binding the islands of Southeast Asia into a single peninsula. Broad plains along the Gulf of Mexico and the Black Sea. Then the water rises. Slowly most years, catastrophically some years. And the world redraws itself. When we stand on today's beaches, we're gazing across the rooftops of the past. It's here, against this cinematic backdrop, that the lost advanced civilization hypothesis takes shape. Did a sophisticated culture flourish before history, only to be erased by flood, fire, or ice, leaving whispers in myth and puzzles in stone? And if you'd like to help me bring more of these mysteries to life, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tonight we follow a trail that runs from Plato's dialogues to submerged towns, from cutting-edge geochemistry to the chisel marks on ancient blocks. The question is simple to ask and hard to test. If a civilization advanced beyond what we expect for its time, truly vanished, what evidence should remain? And have we already found it without understanding what it is? The story begins with a collision of narratives, memory and measurement. On the memory side are flood stories and legends, Atlantis and Greek philosophy, deluge epics from Mesopotamia and India, tales along Pacific and indigenous American coasts, of lands drowned by the sea. On the measurement side is a century of archaeology and earth science that sketches a different arc. Gradual innovation after the Ice Age, with agriculture and cities emerging independently in several regions over millennia. The tension between these arcs invigorates the hypothesis. In 1900, excavators on Crete revealed the palaces of the Minoans, a Bronze Age culture with writing and plumbing. In 1906, Hittite capitals appeared in Anatolia. In 1922, royal tombs at Ur. Later, the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley. Still later, Göbekli Tepe, a monumental complex in southeastern Turkey that predates pottery and domesticated cereals. Each new find seemed to push complexity further back. Meanwhile, the world's map of the Pleistocene shoreline, a map our ancestors knew by foot, lay underwater, barely explored. What if the next revolution in our understanding of the deep past lies not in deserts and highlands, but in shallow seas? To explore the idea seriously, we need a foundation of how time and artifacts are dated. Radiocarbon dating measures the decay of carbon-14 in once living material. Dendrochronology stacks tree rings year by year. Thermoluminescence and optically stimulated luminescence measure trapped electrons to date when minerals were last heated or exposed to light. Tephrochronology uses volcanic ash layers as timestamps. Cosmogenic Nuclides record how long rocks have been exposed at the surface. These methods interlock, cross-checking one another across sites and continents. They tell a coherent story. Farming arises around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. A little later in China and New Guinea. Later still in Mesoamerica and the Andes. The earliest cities bloom several thousand years after that. Writing follows in multiple places. None of this forbids earlier complexity. It sets expectations for what earlier complexity should leave behind. The scientific puzzle at the heart of the hypothesis is taphonomy, the study of how things decay, survive, and fossilize. Skeptics point out that if an advanced civilization capable of large-scale metallurgy, dense urbanism, or industrial chemistry, existed within the last 20,000 years. We should see unmistakable signatures: mines and slag heaps, vast middens, metal tools by the thousands, stratified refuse layers, a web of domesticated plants and animals, and above all, a spread of material culture across many sites. Absence of evidence isn't proof of absence, but archaeology is good at detecting sustained complexity, because complexity litters. Advocates of a lost chapter reply that the deck is stacked. Sea level rose by roughly 120 meters after the Ice Age, swallowing the prime real estate of early coasts. Tropical rains erase organics. Earthquakes in deltas bury cities. Deserts scour them. They're right about the bias. But bias explains gaps. It does not flip the table. The question becomes precise. How much could an earlier civilization hide? And where should we look to give it a fair test?
Submerged archaeology offers an honest middle ground between of course not and of course. Off Israel's coast lies Atlit-Yam, a Neolithic village now under 10 meters of water, complete with houses, hearths, and a stone circle, proof that whole landscapes drowned. Pavlopetri, off Greece, preserves streets and courtyards from the Bronze Age beneath a few meters of sea. In the North Sea, sonar has mapped ancient river channels of Doggerland. Trawls bring up Mesolithic tools from peat. Along India's coast, bathymetry reveals paleo channels and sandbars where rivers once met a lower sea. Some claims of cities here haven't withstood scrutiny, but the geomorphology is real. In Japan, the Yonaguni Monument fuels debate. Erosion versus quarrying versus both, illustrating how easily nature can sculpt patterns that tease the eye. These sites prove two things at once. Vast Pleistocene landscapes are now underwater, and recognizable archaeology can survive there. They do not yet reveal a hidden industrial age, but they mark targets for the next generation of exploration. Continental shelves near ancient river mouths, now 20 to 80 meters deep, where people would have built. If coastal shelves tempt us, megalithic architecture tempts us more. The Great Pyramid at Giza, the perfectly jointed walls of Sacsayhuaman, the bewildering precision at Pumapunku, the massive stones of Baalbek. These monuments feel out of sequence even to seasoned travelers. But monuments are the wrong place to look for lost industry. Experimental archaeology has repeatedly shown that copper saws with sand abrasives can cut granite, that diorite pounders can shape hard stone, that teams can move in upright multi-ton blocks using sledges, lubricated tracks, levered A-frames, and clever ropes. Tool marks match known ancient tools. Quarries, ramps, and left-behind mistakes still sit in the desert sun. Across the planet, stonework tracks cultural lineages and local geology. Andesite and tuff in the Andes, limestone in Egypt, coral in Micronesia, basalt on Rapa Nui. These feats testify not to a single vanished technocracy, but to many societies honing engineering over centuries. If a separate, earlier civilization taught the trick and vanished, it left surprisingly little instruction. No standardized toolkits scattered across continents, no anomalous alloys, no out-of-sequence urban layers beneath later cities. Where the hypothesis gains its modern urgency is at the end of the Ice Age, the Younger Dryas. A sharp, cold snap approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, when temperatures plunge back toward glacial conditions before warming again. Some researchers have suggested that a cosmic impact or airburst, perhaps from a fragmented comet, helped trigger this episode, starting wildfires and rearranging climate. If true, such a catastrophe could have erased coastal settlements and set cultures back, feeding flood myths and a sense of loss. The impact idea remains controversial. Reports of melt glass, microspherules, and platinum anomalies at some sites have met with both supportive replications and failures to replicate. The proposed global wildfire signature is muddied by regional fire histories. Climate models explain much of the Younger Dryas by changes in ocean circulation and meltwater pulses alone. The debate isn't over, but even if a sky-borne disaster occurred, it does not automatically imply a prior industrial civilization. It does imply that people living along then coasts face sudden, lethal change, and that their stories of deluge might echo real, terrifying days. Let's press the advanced and lost advanced civilization and ask what exactly counts. Literacy, monumental architecture, long-distance trade, metallurgy, steam engines, satellites. The more advanced the claim, the more durable the traces we should expect. A literate culture leaves tablets, inscriptions, seals. Metalworking leaves slag and tailings, furnace linings and pits visible from space. An industrial economy leaves stratigraphic fingerprints, spikes of heavy metals, synthetic molecules, unusual isotopes, soot, and a biodiversity reshuffle. Geologists have even proposed tests for detecting an industrial civilization in deep time, the so-called Silurian hypothesis, not because they suspect one, but to frame search images. They suggest looking for abrupt carbon isotope excursions characteristic of massive fossil fuel burning, persistent synthetic compounds, unusual mineral assemblages from cement and fly ash, and global sediment changes from land use. Our own Anthropocene would be obvious to a geologist 10 million years hence. By that yardstick, a civilization on Earth 10,000 years ago would light up the near-surface record, if it were truly industrial. It doesn't.
A more modest advanced is easier to hide. Seafaring, proto-urban settlements along coasts, seafloor fisheries, stone architecture, astronomy, and organized religion. A world more like the late Neolithic pushed seaward. That picture harmonizes with what we know. Göbekli Tepe's carved pillars and enclosures, dating to around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago, suggest ritual architecture before full agriculture. Jericho's wall and tower hint at communal labor near the same era. In southeastern Anatolia, the Natufian culture experimented with cultivation. In China and New Guinea, early agriculture took different forms. In the Andes and Mesoamerica, later independent experiments bloomed. It isn't that civilization suddenly appeared and drowned. It is that the seeds of complexity sprouted in many soils, some of which were later submerged. The lostness in this telling is not of a sci-fi metropolis, but of chapters we haven't read because the pages are underwater or eroded away. What about the classic lodestones for a vanished mother culture? Plato's Atlantis, and the idea that known civilizations are mere fragments of its inheritance. Plato's story is philosophic allegory, not reportage, a moral tale about hubris and ideal states. Attempts to map it onto a real event usually land on the eruption of Thera, Santorini, and the decline of the Minoans, a Bronze Age disaster far younger than the Ice Age. The resonance with flood myths elsewhere has simpler explanations. Sea level rise after the Ice Age was not smooth. Meltwater pulses sent the ocean landward in fits and starts. Catastrophic outburst floods roared across North America when glacial dams failed. Elsewhere, mega tsunamis from landslides and quakes battered coasts. Oral traditions are excellent at encoding landscape change. Many indigenous narratives track real shifts in shoreline and volcano with remarkable accuracy. Parallel floods do not require a single global city. They require a single global sea. Respectfully engaging with fringe interpretations is part of the job. Claims about power tools in Old Kingdom Egypt clash with the physical evidence. Copper toolkits, saw kerfs, and drill cores whose spiral grooves match abrasive slurry and bow drills. Unfinished blocks that freeze the process mid-stroke. Assertions that Pumapunku was molded from geopolymer concrete face counter evidence in the crystalline structure of the andesite and sandstone, with consistent quarry sources and hammerstone signatures. Proposals that submerge roads near Bimini are artificial struggle against the geology of beach rock that naturally fractures into rectangular blocks. None of this diminishes the wonder of the sites. It simply gives credit where it's due, to the ingenuity of the cultures that built them with the materials and physics at hand. If a lost chapter existed, where might we have the best chance to find it? Think like a river. Target paleo deltas and estuaries on continental shelves where freshwater meets the sea. Former hubs for people, now 20 to 80 meters down. Map ancient shorelines with high-resolution sonar. Ground truth with cores to find hearth charcoal and worked stone. In the Black Sea, anoxic deep waters preserve wood for millennia. In the eastern Mediterranean, submerged Bronze Age harbors sleep beneath modern marinas. Along India's and Sri Lanka's coasts, drowned river mouths beckon. Beyond the seas, look for ghosts in pollen and micro-charcoal. Abrupt changes in vegetation or fire that signal land clearing and agriculture earlier than expected. Hunt for patterns of shell middens marching along now drowned coasts. All of these are being done, though the oceans are vast and the budget small. The hypothesis, in its cautious form, is testable, not by finding lasers fused into bedrock, but by compiling an atlas of submerged Neolithic worlds. Alongside the archaeology runs a second, quieter thread: the fragility of knowledge. You don't need a cataclysm to lose an art. Roman concrete exceeded most modern blends for durability. Its recipe was forgotten and only recently re-engineered. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer for predicting celestial motions, lay corroding beneath the Aegean until sponge divers hauled it up in 1901. Delicate scientific traditions can flourish and die with their patrons. The collapse around 1200 BCE rearranged the eastern Mediterranean's map in a generation. The Maya suffered repeated demographic and political shifts. Libraries burn, scripts fall silent. A lost advanced civilization, stripped of high-tech trappings, is a reminder that complexity is not guaranteed to persist. Our own era's digital wealth sits on hard drives that may not survive 2 centuries. Clay tablets last 10,000 years. That asymmetry ought to humble us. Philosophically, the hypothesis asks a more personal question. Why do we yearn for apparent civilization behind the known ones? Part of the pull is romance. The comfort of thinking there was a golden age when someone had the answers. Part is pattern recognition. When you see the same motifs in stone or myth across oceans, you either posit contact, convergence, or coincidence. Humans are remarkable convergers. Give a stone and a sun, and we will align monuments to solstices. Give us a challenge, and absent a phone line, we will invent the knot, the drum, the beacon fire. We are also remarkable travelers. Mariners crossed the Pacific long before Europeans imagined it. Traders laced the Indian Ocean with routes that predate many empires. Diffusion happens, but diffusion does not require a single source. The beauty of our species is polyphony. In the end, the lost advanced civilization hypothesis becomes less a claim and more a lens. Through it, we see how little of Earth's habitable past we have sampled, how our preconceptions can be jolted by a carved pillar older than farming, how myths can encode geophysics, how scientific dating, however refined, is always sharpened by new finds, how extraordinary feats in stone are best explained by patience, skill, and community, and how the ocean keeps its secrets longer than the desert does. If an earlier coast-hugging society with sophisticated navigation, ritual centers, and seasonal towns existed in the late Ice Age, we should expect to find more of it as underwater archaeology matures. If an industrial civilization existed then, it should already have shouted at us from the strata. So far, the whispers we hear are human in the plural, not singular. Many beginnings, many inventions, many losses. Picture that drowned shoreline one last time. Smoke from cooking fires curls into a pale sky. A child draws a boat in the sand. Fisherfolk pull in nets at dawn, watching the tide creep higher year by year, making small adjustments that feel eternal until a storm sweeps the village away. Far inland, at a hilltop sanctuary, carvers set a stone upright, its animals facing cardinal points. None of this is less wondrous for being within our reach to understand. It is more wondrous because it is ours. Ancestors across continents improvising their worlds into being. The sea took some chapters. Science is learning to read them underwater. We end then, not with a verdict, but with an invitation. The hypothesis lives or dies by evidence, and evidence grows where we choose to look. Funding bathymetric mapping and underwater digs, refining dates and climate models, testing bold claims against stubborn rocks. These are not just academic pursuits. They are how we learn what kind of story we are in. So here's my question for you. If you could aim the next expedition anywhere on those lost Pleistocene coastlines, where would you point the ship? And what in your heart do you hope we find when the silt settles?